Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're zeroing in on the upcoming August 27th fixture between the home side Buffalo Bills and the visiting Pittsburgh Steelers. Let's get right out onto the gridiron. Right off the bat, you should know this isn't your standard run-of-the-mill preview. We're getting heavily into a tactical explainer here, one that's driven purely by analytics and underlying structural matchups. Okay, let's dive into this because this entire game really hinges on one massive overarching question. How does uncertainty dictate execution? Look, since this fixture falls in late August, we are operating in a zone of incredibly heavy roster rotation. That means we absolutely cannot rely on unverified 2026 statistics, things like expected points added or EPA and success rates. Honestly, inventing those numbers right now just creates false precision. So instead, we have to look directly at the play-level mechanisms that are actually going to decide the football game. Section 1, Tactical Structures and Execution. Now, offensive rhythm is just incredibly fragile in rotation-heavy games like this one. Buffalo's success path relies heavily, almost exclusively, on early down efficiency. They absolutely need positive first down runs and quick completions to set up those nice second and manageable situations, which lets them keep their entire playbook wide open. But if you look at their failure path, early negative plays or a protection error, well, that gets ugly fast. Finding themselves in obvious passing downs exposes their interior communication to disguise pressure, and that radically increases the risk of a sack or a turnover. And that segues perfectly into Pittsburgh's primary defensive counter, simulated pressure. Essentially, this means bringing four rushers but totally mixing up who they actually are. So traditional edge rushers might suddenly drop back into coverage, while a linebacker or a safety attacks the interior. For Pittsburgh, this is basically the golden ticket. By generating pressure with just four men, they can drop 7 defenders into coverage to cap explosive throws. It keeps the quarterback's escape lanes contained without leaving the middle of the field wide open. Section 2, the key tactical unit duels. Let's zoom in on the matchups. First up is the battle right at the line of scrimmage. It's the Buffalo protection plan squaring off against the Pittsburgh pressure plan. Pittsburgh is out there hunting for highly disciplined four-man rushes that keep the outside lanes completely intact, basically boxing the quarterback in. Buffalo's offensive line has a massive task on their hands here. They have to identify those defensive overloads before the snap and give the quarterback a hot outlet immediately. What Buffalo wants to avoid at absolutely all costs is forcing their running backs to make really difficult split-second scan decisions in pass protection. And this brilliantly illustrates our second major duel, Buffalo's early down efficiency going up against Pittsburgh's run fits and tackling. Like we just talked about, Buffalo desperately wants those repeated second and manageable situations. To stop that, Pittsburgh is relying on strict run fits, which just means correct gap assignments and setting firm edges, paired with immediate tackling on underneath throws. The so what here is simple. If Buffalo consistently stays ahead of the chains, Pittsburgh is completely handcuffed. They just won't be able to deploy their most aggressive, obvious passing down pressure packages. Flipping to the other side of the ball, we have the Pittsburgh quarterback room taking on the Buffalo coverage rotation. Now, Buffalo's goal defensively isn't necessarily hunting for some highlight reel interception. It's actually about presenting a stable pre-snap picture, rotating late, and forcing third and longs. Pittsburgh has to counter this tactically. You're going to want to watch for them to use pre-snap motion to reveal defensive leverage and condensed receiver splits to try and create quick answers for the quarterback. Pittsburgh's success in this matchup is judged purely by whether they can repeatedly reach manageable third downs. Because it's late August, we're likely looking at a reserve offensive line going up against an opposing front for a huge chunk of this game. So keep your eyes peeled for these critical execution markers. Interior leakage on the O-line, unblocked edge rushers immediately after play action, running backs completely missing their scan assignments, and chaotic special teams coverage. Look, in a rotation-heavy game like this, just 2 pressure-driven turnovers or repeated unblocked rushers will heavily outweigh whatever total yardage a team manages to compile. In these games, snap execution is quite literally everything. Section 3, Live Cues and Game States. Before you even glance at the scoreboard in the first quarter, I want you to focus on 3 specific live cues. Step 1, verify the active quarterback and the first 5 offensive line. Step 2, identify the primary returners on special teams. And Step 3, observe whether either defense is successfully generating pressure using only 4 rushers. Because roster rotation is the primary driver of this entire game's outcome, these live cues are your ground truth. A single change from a starting center to a reserve alters the whole projection instantly. Which builds directly into our 3 specific game states. Game state 1. If Buffalo takes an early lead. Their path to closing out the game becomes all about keeping the ball out of long yardage protection situations. They're going to need efficient runs, selective play action, and quick throws. But keep this in the back of your mind. If their early lead is built purely on turnovers or some chaotic kick return, rather than sustained offensive drives, that lead is going to be as fragile as a house of cards. Conversely, let's look at game state 2, if Pittsburgh leads early. If this happens, Buffalo shouldn't automatically hit the panic button and jack up their dropback volume. Upping the tempo really only works if your pass protection is rock solid. Otherwise, you're just drastically raising the risk of sacks and turnovers. For Pittsburgh to protect that early lead, they have to maintain incredibly strict edge discipline, absolutely refuse to allow easy quarterback scrambles, and force Buffalo into long, methodical, exhausting drives. So the crucial point is what happens if we enter game state 3, the fourth quarter crucible. We're talking about a tied or one-score game late in the fixture. In this scenario, whoever is actively on the field dictates everything. The team that successfully creates third and short situations will control the closing route of the game. Furthermore, it's field position rather than conventional win probability models that will govern those tricky fourth down decisions. In a tight game with heavy roster rotations, literally a single coverage lane failure on special teams could end it instantly.
Section 4, the verdict and analytics. Disclaimer. Let's look at the numbers.
Our model currently projects a combined point total of 37 for this fixture. Now, this assumes a highly rotation-sensitive environment. We're anticipating that conservative play calling and stalled reserve drives are going to keep scoring pretty suppressed overall. But those lulls will occasionally be offset by sudden short field variance or a major breakdown on special teams. So it's a broad scoring path heavily influenced by unpredictable late-game substitutions. When we break down who's actually going to win this thing, the model estimate gives Buffalo a win probability of 55%, Pittsburgh 44%, and a theoretical 1% chance of a regulation tie. But I want to be perfectly clear about that Buffalo edge here. That 55% is a very modest, low-confidence lean. It's based almost entirely on their home side designation and some limited historical context. Absolutely not on any claimed 2026 efficiency advantage. Why? Because that data simply doesn't exist yet. Translating that directly to the scoreboard, we get a projected model estimate of Buffalo 20, Pittsburgh 17. This 3-point margin is deliberately conservative. We have to discount standard historical ratings because, frankly, we're missing verified efficiency data, and most importantly, we're dealing with a completely unverified quarterback participation plan. Which brings us to a vital analytics disclaimer. Everything we just went through is a conditional projection, not an observed performance rating. This entire projection is exquisitely sensitive to who actually takes the field. If Buffalo's first unit quarterback and offensive line play meaningful snaps, their win probability logically rises. But if rotations are super heavy and Pittsburgh's defensive front manages to win with just 4 rushers all day, this fixture essentially turns into a coin flip. The personnel out there dictates the math. Ultimately, the grand narrative of this matchup isn't about deep season statistics at all. It's an intricate tactical chess match of snap allocation and execution under extreme uncertainty. So I'll leave you with this final thought to ponder as you watch. When the starters take their helmets off and the reserves step onto the gridiron, which team's rotation will master the uncertainty and dictate that final fourth quarter crucible? Watch the offensive line, track the defensive pressure, and enjoy the tactical battle out there. Thanks for joining me on this explainer.